I'm going to talk about what I first learned from Jeff Gleason, and I also read Gunji Koizumi writing about this in one of his books about the three aspects of training, the three primary aspects of judo, actually, of the study and practice and promulgation of judo. So let's look at these three aspects, and all of judo is involved in these, what happens in these three things. So let's take a look at it. So it's really, again, I first learned about it from Jeff Gleason. I read a number of his books. I was heavily influenced by him, and I heard other people say this as well. And then on further research, I read this, as I said, about the Gunji Koizumi, who was one of the early real pioneers of British judo. And I think this is really solid stuff we're going to talk about. So the three elements, the three basis things, the three fundamentals of judo that you do practically are kata, randori, and shiai. Okay, kata, randori, and shiai. Everything we do in judo, and when you look at anything in sport, pretty much covers anything we do in any sporting activity as well. So let's kind of dissect these things. What is kata? Kata is structured training. Kata is structured practice. Kata means form or structure. And it's more than just doing the Nagi no Kata or the Ju no Kata or whatever. Kata is what Jigoro Kano introduced early on in the days of the Kodokan, that he wanted to have kata. I think in 1883 or 1884, he started developing the early kata of judo. He wanted to do that to bring structured training and methodology to his students. You just didn't show up and roll around and do randori. You had to have a structured training. So kata brought that. Okay, so you can look at kata in a broad sense. In that very way, it's structured training. You can also narrow it down to their specific different types of kata in Kodokan Judo or any of the karate or the martial arts. They have the different katas, their forms. And that's the transmission of technical skill from one generation to the next, okay? There weren't a lot of books. There certainly was no videotape back in 1882, 1883 when Kano developed judo. So he had to have some way of continuing on the education, the technical skills based on solid theory to his students. Well, it was kata. That was what it was. It was kata. It was structured training. And he found he did this because he saw his students were getting tougher, but they were getting more brutal. They were getting rougher around the edges. He didn't want them just to be a bunch of thugs, basically. He wanted them to be refined and have skill. So he knew there were a lot of skills in judo, but in randori, they were always falling back on what worked best for them. So he had to have a way of teaching so that they would expand their knowledge. Well, guess what? The structured training he introduced, this kata. And you compare that to any sport. Let's take the sport of American football, okay? The reason I'm saying American football because it's called football in the rest of the world except the United States. But in our American football, the type where there are 11 guys on each side, they bang each other, okay, or any sport, okay? It could be soccer, as we call it here, soccer or football in the rest of the world. There is kata to that. When you show up, you just don't scrimmage the whole practice. You show up and you do plays. You work on technique. You work on skills. That's what kata is. So kata is structured training. It is that drill training. It is that structure that every good practice must have if it's going to be a good practice, a productive practice. So that's what kata is. So kata, first phase, kata, okay? The second one is randori, free practice. Randori is not a tournament. Randori means free practice. It basically means an open-ended freedom of movement, freedom of choice, freedom of action. Okay, that's what randori is. It's rolling, going live, whatever you want to call it. But if you just show up and you warm up a little bit and let's randori for an hour, now there may be some practices when you are in your, maybe you're doing a periodization or a training camp for a specific event where that is what you're supposed to do that day. There may be that's what you do, randori. But generally, you don't. Okay, that it has to be a specific purpose for that randori. And here's what we talk about. Randori must have a purpose. There must be a reason why you are doing randori. Just like in, again, American football, there is a reason why you scrimmage. Okay, it can be a practice game, yes, but generally the coach wants certain things done at that scrimmage. just like boxers. I was an amateur boxer, not a very good one, but I was for a while. And every time we sparred, okay, it wasn't a fight, it was sparring. Sometimes they were harder than others. But every time we sparred, there was a reason why my coach wanted us to spar. And same when I run a practice, whether it's Judo, Sambo, Jiu-Jitsu, whatever it may be, there's a reason why I want my guys to Randori. There's a purpose behind that Randori, or what are we going to do here today? And I specifically state that to my athletes and students when we practice, okay? It could be just a recreational workout, just on any given week and, day in the week. And that's what I'll tell them. Okay, guys, have fun, nobody hurt. It's just open Randori, take care of each other, Or it could be we're training for a specific event. I'm saying, okay, guys, here's what I want you to do in this game, in this type of Randori today. This is what we're going to do, okay? And so Randori should have a purpose, but it is open-ended training, but you shouldn't just show up in Randori, okay? That is an incomplete workout. And I know that's macho to do. It's cool to do. A lot of clubs do that. But you know what? You're going to stalemate out. It's going to only happen so much as after a while, you stop getting good. You got to have that structured training that Kata delivers, the true drill training, the structure and training. But Randori, if you think of Randori as another drill, which it is, then you're better off, okay? Like Anne Maria DeMars said many times, I've heard her say it in training, Randori is not a tournament. There are no winners or losers in Randori. Some get more competitive than others, that's true. But, Randori is training. So keep that in mind. That's the second aspect, Kata, Randori, okay? The third aspect is Shiai, the contest. And Kano, I think, named it Shiai on purpose because it means to meet together to test. It's a testing place. It's testing your skills against another person's skills, okay? A shobu is a fight. That's also a contest, but it's more in the line of a real fight, okay? So he didn't call it shobu. He called it Shiai, meeting together with a purpose of testing your mettle, your skill against someone else's. Okay, and that's generally a competitive situation. Okay, in self-defense training, let's say you're doing specific things. You have a set type of Shiai you want to follow to meet, to test yourself in a real situation. You can determine the parameters of your Shiai where you want it to be. Okay, but generally it's accepted in the judo world that it is a competition. Okay, you're testing yourself against others of equal or better skill or lesser skill, whatever it may be. But is it a meeting together to get together of testing yourself against others? And that's really what it is, okay? So there are three elements of training. And I think, I first learned them from Gleason and later from Koizumi, and I've heard other instructors talk about them as well. That is Kata, Randori, and Shiai. And if you think of it as a coach, like I am, and other coaches, younger coaches, if you think of it, you're training that way and break it up that way, it'll synthesize back together, and you'll have a much better practice and a much better general program for your students.